Welcome to the Shadows of Fear channel. Now I will guide you through a world of darkness, witches, and unknown creatures. I hope this helps you disconnect from your daily routine and relax. To avoid any visual distractions, we will leave the screen black and let your imagination run wild. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your country. Now, let's begin.
I am a woman of science, someone who believes in facts rather than superstitions, and my work leaves no room for doubts or emotions. I am dedicated to unraveling the secrets of lifeless bodies. My role is to observe, document, and finally close the final chapter of those who can no longer tell their own story. I have spent years in this morgue, enduring endless and solitary shifts, and the routine has become as familiar as breathing. But that night, something shattered the logic that anchored me so firmly. I never imagined that, at the foot of the cold and silent autopsy table, I would begin to question how solid what we consider real truly is. That night, I was alone in the morgue, and the silence was oppressive, thick, as if something invisible was slowly crushing me. It was that kind of silence charged with presences, where even the slightest noise takes on an unsettling depth. I had just finished the reports for a particularly complicated autopsy. The body had arrived that very afternoon, a middle-aged man, a victim of a hit-and-run. He was so mangled that he barely retained a trace of humanity. I never felt good about these kinds of cases, but after years as a forensic pathologist, I had learned to slip into professional neutrality, to close my eyes to the emotional weight of my work. The clock hands were slowly approaching midnight, and exhaustion was already taking over my thoughts. I crossed the room with the intention of making one last check of the storage units before heading home. The cold of the refrigeration unit greeted me with an almost invigorating touch. As I walked among the perfectly aligned cadaver trays, I noticed something out of place. One of the trays at the back of the room wasn't completely closed. It was ajar by just a few centimeters, enough for a strip of stainless steel to peek through the gap. I felt a chill. Something wasn't right. I remembered checking all the trays, ensuring they were properly closed. I approached carefully, and the low hum of the refrigeration blended with the pounding of my heart, which had begun to quicken. My first thought was that it could be a mechanical failure, a faulty latch. It wouldn't be the first time. The morgue equipment had its imperfections. However, a deep sense of unease began to form in the pit of my stomach as I reached for the tray. I felt the icy cold of the handle before grasping it. Then, something made me stop. I examined the latch and noticed it was forced. The clasp was bent and scratched, as if someone had tried to pry it open with a tool. This wasn't an accident. Someone had been here. But how? I was the only person on the night shift, and all the doors were locked. My heart raced as I tried to rationalize what I saw, but I found no logical explanation. Access was strictly restricted, and yet someone had tampered with the lock. I pushed the tray back in and secured it carefully. Without losing a moment, I headed to the security room at the end of the hall. I entered the access code and examined the camera footage. The room appeared empty throughout the night, still and sterile. The playback seemed normal, but when I reached 11:30, I noticed something that made me hold my breath. A flash of static on the camera, as if the image had been interrupted for a second. I watched the recording more closely. It wasn't enough to be alarming under normal circumstances, but now that slight flicker felt like a hole in reality. Fear began to morph into something deeper, a dense and dark sensation. The room was in total calm,
But
For some reason, I felt as though I wasn't alone. I slowly returned to the main room, my mind tangled in the images, the camera flicker, and the forced lock. Suddenly, an intense cold swept over me, and a strange silence enveloped the atmosphere, heavier, denser. A slight breeze brushed my skin. I looked around. All the corpses were in their place, every tray closed, every shadow in its spot. And then I heard it. It was a soft whisper, barely perceptible, something that at first might have been mistaken for the buzzing of fluorescent lights. But it wasn't that. It was a faint voice, almost a murmur, coming from the back of the room, from the tray I had found open. A shiver ran down my spine. The voice murmured unintelligible words, something dragged out, as if it did not belong to the world of the living. Against all logic, my legs moved toward the source of the whisper. My breath was shallow, each step resonating like thunder in the morgue's silence. I approached the tray and, almost against my will, extended my hand to open it again. I pulled on the handle, and the tray slowly slid outward. What I saw was so disturbing that my hands began to tremble. There, on the cold stainless steel surface, was the body of the man from the accident, just as I had left it before. But his face was no longer deformed. He was looking directly at me, his eyes open, empty, but fixed on mine, and a strange, faint smile curved his shattered lips. That smile stretched into an impossible grimace. I instinctively recoiled, but tripped and fell to the floor. When I got back up, I noticed that the body had moved slightly, as if it had tried to sit up. His hands, once rigid, now hung over the edges of the tray. A chill raced through me as a muffled, mocking laughter flooded the morgue's air, echoing in every corner, as if it came from every tray, from every shadow. I turned to run, but my legs felt anchored to the ground. I tried to pull away, stumbling and feeling cold sweat trickle down my back. As I reached the door, a final whisper, clear and sharp, cut through the air.
I'll see you tomorrow.
I stumbled out, barely aware of my steps. I reached the security room, feeling my skin taut and cold, and I turned off the lights in the morgue. Before closing the door, I took one last look into the dark room and saw that the tray was open again. And the smile was still there, waiting for me. Since that night, I have never been alone in the morgue again.
If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. In the morgue, time seems to stand still, and the echoes of life fade away between the sterile walls, where silence reigns supreme. For those of us who work here, death becomes a routine. But that night, something shattered the meticulous calm of my work. A case that appeared to be just another turned into an abyss of unease that threatened to pull me into something darker. As I reviewed the evidence, I began to sense the disturbing presence of a hidden, lurking intention that unsettled my perception of reality. That night, I was alone, sifting through the records of a recent case. A young man, hit in a hit-and-run, had arrived without identification and with barely a few belongings. The police were searching for clues, but the cameras in the area had only captured the fleeing vehicle. As I examined the deceased's clothing, I found something unexpected in the pocket of his jacket. It was a crumpled note, I thought it would be a receipt or worthless trash until I unfolded the paper and read the first words. My name, scrawled in trembling, hurried handwriting, Dr. Samuel. My heart raced. How could a stranger know my name? And what was written in that note struck me like a dagger to the chest. I don't have much time. They know about your family. Lydia, Anna, take care of them. They are watching you. I stepped back, almost dropping the paper. Lydia and Anna were the names of my wife and daughter. Information that no one outside my inner circle could possibly know. The air in the autopsy room grew thick. I looked at the corpse, searching for answers in its vacant face. A man I had never seen in my life, but who seemed to know every detail of mine. I quickly turned to the fingerprint system, searching for a match in the database. The screen flickered, and time seemed to slow as the system processed. In the midst of the wait, I decided to review the case files. What I found was even more disconcerting. The autopsy notes, which I had written myself the night before, were altered. The wounds, the angle of the impact, the description, every detail was subtly changed, just enough to make me doubt my own memory. I called my supervisor, explaining the situation with as much calm as I could muster, though inside I felt a chilling panic. The note, the changes in the report, the sensation of being watched. Something or someone was manipulating every element of this case. We reviewed the security footage from the previous night, searching for any signs of unauthorized access, any hint of activity. To our surprise, the monitors showed absolute emptiness. The cameras had not captured any movement at all. As we watched the recording, I noticed something chilling. At one moment during the autopsy, a shadow peeked into the edge of the camera, watching me from a distance. My supervisor and I exchanged incredulous glances. No one had entered the morgue all night, yet that shadow was there, right at the edge of perception, as if something had been watching us. That same night, I returned to the lab, obsessed with finding answers. Each time I reviewed the details, each change in the notes, each alteration in the evidence, I felt a presence brushing against me, a force that challenged me, seeming to anticipate each of my movements. I tried to rationalize, to think that perhaps it was all a mistake, that maybe fatigue was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something more was happening. It was as if someone or something was mocking my disbelief, as if this presence in the morgue wanted to leave me a message whose dark magnitude I had yet to comprehend. For weeks, the presence persisted, with subtle changes that seemed to be only for my eyes. A slight disorder in the documents, instruments out of place, a shadow at the edge of my vision. We never managed to identify the man or decipher the origin of that note. And each time I returned to the morgue, I felt that penetrating gaze waiting. Now, every night when I leave, I feel its weight as a silent warning. Maybe one day the truth will be revealed. Maybe not. But every time I cross the door of the morgue in the cold abyss that envelops me, I know that someone or something has been here, leaving me alone with the void, in a game that only death understands. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue.
Since I began working as a forensic pathologist, I learned that death never comes alone. It always brings its own secrets. The morgue, with its solemn silence and cold walls, is a kind of sanctuary for those mysteries. There, under the unrelenting fluorescent light, I have dissected hidden stories, tearing answers from silent bodies. But there are nights when even the dead seem to want to keep something to themselves. This was one of those nights. I felt it in the air, heavy and expectant, as if an invisible whisper were lingering in the shadows. It was past midnight, that hour when even the dead seemed to rest more peacefully. The morgue was silent, save for the dull hum of the ventilation system and the occasional clatter of my instruments. I leaned over the body of a young man in his 20s, brutally stabbed in an alley, his wounds narrating a fury so excessive it felt almost personal. The police wanted answers, but I could only think about how unsettling the atmosphere felt that night. I was alone. The sterile white light illuminated every corner, but the weight of an invisible gaze bore down on my neck, as if someone were watching me from the shadows. I glanced at the observation window, the one detectives sometimes use to follow the procedure, and confirmed that no one was there. The door was closed, and I hadn't heard anyone come in. I forced myself to return to the body, to focus on the wounds and the angle of the cuts, but the sensation persisted, like a subtle pressure at the edges of my mind. Each time I turned to grab an instrument, that uncomfortable feeling intensified, becoming more tangible, almost real. It seemed impossible, but I found myself stealing quick glances over my shoulder, as if at any moment something might emerge from the gloom. I felt like I wasn't alone. After what felt like an eternity, I completed the autopsy. But that feeling of unease, which usually disappeared when I closed the final suture, lingered that night. Before leaving, I decided to check the security recordings. I needed to confirm that I was alone, that this was all a trick of the shadows, a result of accumulated fatigue. The security room was deserted. I quickly fast-forwarded the recording of the autopsy room, watching my own figure hunched over the body, alone in the sterile, silent space. At first, everything appeared normal. But as the footage progressed, something startled me. In a fleeting instant, while examining one of the wounds, a shadow moved in the background, just beyond the observation window. My heart stopped. I replayed the recording at a slower speed, and there it was. A tall figure, broad-shouldered, watching me from the other side of the glass. There was no face, just a heavy, dark shadow, motionless, yet radiating an intensity that froze my blood. It was as if those invisible eyes had been boring into me throughout the entire autopsy. I advanced the recording over and over, watching how the figure remained still, silently observing me. Then, when I turned to leave the room in the recording, the figure faded away, disappearing into the shadows as if it had never been there. My hands trembled as I stopped the video. I reviewed the security logs with the staff the next day. There was no trace of activity in the observation room. No one had used their access cards, and the cameras showed the door closed all night. And yet, I knew someone had been watching me. I knew that, although I couldn't prove it, I had felt that presence with every fiber of my being. That night, I returned to the morgue with the sensation that someone was waiting for me. As I walked down the cold hallway, a certainty washed over me that almost made me stop. That stranger in the darkness was not just any intruder. No, it was something much older, something that fed on secrets, fears, and every decomposed body I left in that room. The weight of that invisible gaze was there, waiting, knowing that I felt it too, aware that perhaps one day it wouldn't be me performing the autopsy, but the body lying on the table.
If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. In the heart of a remote village in Colombia, surrounded by dense forests and shrouded in a constant veil of mist, an event occurred that still chills its inhabitants. Diana, the young woman with a radiant smile and a generous spirit, was known by everyone in the community. Her sudden death, caused by a rare and fatal heart condition, plunged the village into deep sorrow. The church bells rang with sadness the day of her funeral, and a silent crowd gathered to bid her farewell, convinced that her soul had already found peace. However, that very night, the village ceased to be a refuge of calm. From the depths of the cemetery, just past midnight, came heart-wrenching moans that froze the blood of those living nearby. The cries were not the natural sounds of the wind or the creaking of branches. They were human wails, agonizing and desperate, emanating from the freshly sealed grave of Diana. For 2 days and 2 nights, the screams continued, driving the neighbors mad as they gathered in the streets, too afraid to cross the cemetery gates but unable to ignore what was happening. Finally, Diana's family, driven by fear and desperation, sought permission from the priest and the mayor to open the grave. The request was granted, and before an expectant crowd, the tombstone was removed and the coffin exposed. The lid creaked as it was lifted, and a thick silence fell over the place. Inside the coffin, Diana lay untouched, her skin still fresh, but with an expression that sent chills through everyone. Her eyes, wide and fixed, held in infinite anguish. Before the witnesses could react, a muffled groan escaped from her lips, and her trembling hands slowly rose. Panic swept through the crowd. Screams and sobs filled the air as some ran in terror while others stood hypnotized, watching as Diana, with slow, brittle movements, began to sit up. Her legs faltered beneath her, but something in her gaze seemed to demand more than help. Those who tried to approach recoiled, feeling an inhuman cold emanating from her body. Her family, torn between fear and hope, surrounded her, unsure of what to do or think. In the days that followed, Diana's behavior grew increasingly disturbing. She no longer recognized anyone, not even her parents or friends. Her eyes, shadowed by unknown darkness, seemed to see beyond this world. She spoke in a raspy voice about gray landscapes and figures that crawled in silence. She described how, from that place, she had witnessed her own burial, surrounded by shadows that whispered her name. Every word that left her lips struck the hearts of her listeners. and the sense that something unnatural had brought her back grew stronger. "Death is only the beginning," she murmured incessantly. Her stories grew darker as she began to describe a tall, gaunt figure with hollow eyes who had been watching her from the depths of that shadowy world. The figure, she claimed, had followed her across the divide and now whispered from the shadows of her room at night. The entire village began to change. Animals fled in fear, and plants in the gardens near Diana's house withered for no apparent reason. The children, who once played freely in the streets, no longer dared pass by her house, where candles seemed to go out without wind and the windows vibrated with inaudible whispers. Her family, on the brink of despair, consulted the priest, but even he, after visiting Diana, left pale and mute, as though his faith had been stripped by what he had seen. One night, the tension reached a breaking point in an event that would be forever etched in the collective memory. Diana vanished from the house without a trace. The search, led by her parents and friends, took them once again to the cemetery, where some claimed to have seen a pale figure wandering between the tombstones. When they arrived, the full moon illuminated a sight they would never forget. In her former grave, Diana's body lay, now showing obvious signs of decomposition. Her skin, which had been intact only days before, was now dry and cracked, her eyes empty, and her mouth twisted into an impossible smile. Horror and disbelief seized everyone. No one could explain how the body had returned to its resting place or why it had begun to rot so rapidly. An old man from the village, known for his tales of ancient legends, whispered with a trembling voice, "What returns from death is not always what it was. Sometimes it brings something with it." By morning, the rumors had intensified. Some swore they had seen Diana walking through the village, leaving no trace or shadow, while others claimed to hear the same mournful moan that had escaped her grave on that fateful night. The terrified inhabitants began boarding up their windows and avoiding the cemetery at all costs. No one spoke openly about the matter, but everyone knew that Diana's death, or rather her return, was an omen of something far more sinister. Weeks later, the case was deemed an unsolved mystery. Visits to the cemetery dwindled, and Diana's house was abandoned, a silent reminder of a horror that defied all understanding. Nights in the village grew restless again, and every breeze that passed through the streets carried with it a distant echo, a whisper that said, "Death is only the beginning." To this day, the villagers shudder when they remember. The scars of that event still pulse beneath the surface, a reminder that there are things that should not return from where they belong, and that in the fine line between life and death, there are secrets that should remain buried forever. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. In the depths of the Colombian Amazon jungle, where the humidity soaks every corner and the darkness seems eternal, there lies a small indigenous village. Its inhabitants, descendants of an ancient civilization, carefully guard their traditions and legends, many of which are tied to supernatural forces and dark entities. Among them is the story of Anahi, a young shaman who had been chosen to lead her tribe toward a prosperous future. Anahi was known for her wisdom and her deep connection to the spirit of the jungle. However, during an ancestral ritual, something went terribly wrong. In an attempt to summon a protective ancestral spirit, Anahi accidentally opened a door to a dark and unknown realm. A malevolent force seized her, corrupting both her body and soul. Days later, Anahi died under strange circumstances. Her body, once radiating vitality, had become cold and rigid as stone, and her eyes, once full of wisdom, were now empty and glassy. The tribe's shamans tried to perform a purification ritual, but nothing could break the curse that bound her to that dark entity. On the night of her burial, the village descended into chaos. Heart-wrenching screams echoed from the cemetery, where Anahi had been laid to rest. Terrified villagers claimed to see a spectral figure emerging from the grave. A figure that seemed to be Anahi, but with eyes that burned like embers and a macabre smile revealing sharp teeth. As the days passed, the attacks grew more frequent. Crops withered, animals died mysteriously, and villagers began to disappear without a trace. Some claimed to have seen Anahi roaming the jungle, accompanied by sinister shadows. Desperate, the shamans tried to contact the ancestral spirits for help, but they either remained indifferent or were filled with fear. The legend tells that Anahi had become a muina, an evil spirit that feeds on the fear and suffering of the living. It was said that the muina could possess humans, turning them into its slaves, and thus spreading its dark realm. On the brink of despair, the villagers decided to take a desperate measure to burn Anahi's body. They believed this would destroy the muina that inhabited her. With great sorrow, they carried her body into a jungle clearing and surrounded it with firewood. As the flames consumed Anahi's body, the shamans chanted ancient songs to protect the village. However, when the flames died down and the ashes were scattered by the wind, the villagers realized they had made a mistake. The muina had not been destroyed. On the contrary, it seemed to have multiplied, spreading its influence throughout the jungle. Anahi's screams could be heard from every corner, and the shadows moved with greater speed and ferocity. The villagers, realizing they could not defeat the muina on their own, decided to abandon their home and seek refuge in other lands. But they knew that the evil they had unleashed would chase them to the end of their days. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. In the remote village of San Lorenzo, nestled between snow-capped mountains and shadowy forests, there is an ancient legend about a forgotten cemetery where the darkest of sinners lie buried. It is said that on nights of the full moon, a forbidden ritual can resurrect the dead, but at a terrible cost. Their souls will be corrupted by a malevolent force. Don Anselmo, an elderly hermit known for his wisdom and dark knowledge, had studied ancient grimoires for years that spoke of this ritual. Obsessive about the power it would grant him, he decided to perform the ceremony on the darkest night of the year. In the cemetery, beneath the pale light of the moon, Don Anselmo drew a magical circle around a freshly dug grave. With a hoarse voice and bloodshot eyes, he recited the forbidden words, summoning the forces of darkness. The earth trembled, the wind howled, and an icy cold enveloped the place. Suddenly, the coffin burst open, and a twisted, emaciated figure emerged. It was the body of his deceased wife, but her eyes burned with an infernal fire, and her mouth twisted into a macabre smile, revealing sharp teeth. At first, Don Anselmo felt elated. He had done what no one else had dared. But soon he realized his terrible mistake. His wife, now possessed by a dark force, turned against him. With supernatural strength, she knocked him down and began biting him frantically, transferring the curse to him. The next day, the people of San Lorenzo found Don Anselmo's mangled body, and his wife was wandering the cemetery, her eyes hollow and with an insatiable thirst for blood. Terror gripped the village. The elders warned that a malignant force had been unleashed, and that only the unity of the people could stop it. They decided to perform a collective exorcism, but the force that possessed the woman was too powerful. No prayer or blessing seemed to have any effect. The curse spread quickly, turning more people into bloodthirsty monsters. The village became a battlefield. The infected, with glowing eyes and spasmodic movements, attacked anyone who crossed their path. The few survivors sought refuge in the church, but they knew it was only a matter of time before the monsters found them. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, a hooded figure watched with a malevolent smile, pleased with the chaos he had set into motion. He was an ancient enemy of Don Anselmo, a necromancer who had been waiting for the right moment to seek revenge. He had manipulated the old man, guiding him toward the performance of the forbidden ritual, all to unleash chaos and plunge the world into darkness. The necromancer, with his arcane power, managed to control the infected, turning them into his army. His plan was simple: to free the dead across the world and plunge humanity into an age of eternal darkness. The survivors of San Lorenzo, desperate, sought help from an ancient monastery. There, an old monk, familiar with the church's darkest secrets, revealed the only way to stop the necromancer: destroy the grimoire containing the forbidden ritual. A small band of brave souls ventured out into the night to steal the grimoire. They knew it was a suicidal mission, but they were willing to sacrifice themselves to save humanity. After a dangerous journey, they infiltrated the necromancer's castle and stole the book. With the grimoire in their hands, the heroes returned to San Lorenzo and destroyed it in a purifying bonfire. At the same time, the survivors, led by the monk, launched a final assault against the army of the dead. The battle was fierce. The infected fought with supernatural strength, but the living defended themselves with tooth and nail. Finally, thanks to a heroic sacrifice, they managed to defeat the necromancer and his creatures. With the necromancer's death, the curse began to fade. The infected reverted to their human forms, though forever scarred by psychological wounds. The village of San Lorenzo, though suffering irreparable losses, had survived. However, the threat never fully disappeared. It is said that on the darkest nights, when the full moon illuminates the cemeteries, the dead still whisper their names, longing to return to life. And the necromancer, though defeated, may one day return, bringing with him new nightmares and horrors. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. The village of Rascafria, nestled between mountains and dense forests, held a nearly motionless peace in the 70s. Its inhabitants, barely 100, lived in stone houses that seemed as much a part of the landscape as the trees, and the monastery of El Paular was the heart of their traditions. During Holy Week, especially on Good Friday, processions and vigils were held with almost ritualistic solemnity. There were no bright lights, only candles and silence. The story began in the early hours of a Good Friday in 1973. That night, a group of young people, including Angela and Jose, decided to spend the night in the ruins of an old church near the monastery. It was said that the site was protected by an ancient spirit and that no one should remain there past midnight. But that night, driven by curiosity and disbelief, Angela and her friends chose to defy the warnings. Once inside, the cold and dampness seeped into their bones. They sat on the ground, wrapped in blankets, surrounded by shadows broken only by the faint glow of a candle. As the night wore on, the group, now more sleepy than brave, began to close their eyes when a sob shattered the silence. Angela's eyes flew open, holding her breath as she looked at her friends, but they all seemed equally puzzled and afraid. The weeping seemed to come from the shadows, a low and monotonous sound like a woman crying. The group looked toward the entrance, where a faint figure appeared in the darkness, tall and thin, with a veil covering her face. The lament grew more intense, filling the air with a suffocating sorrow that crept into the soul. Jose, attempting to be brave, approached the figure. But as soon as he took a step forward, he felt a wave of cold that froze him in place, as if something were holding him back. Angela reached out to touch his arm, but noticed his skin was as cold as the stone floor beneath them. The woman slowly raised her face, revealing her eyes, completely black. Through the veil, one could barely make out the outline of her mouth, murmuring unintelligible words filled with anguish. One of the boys whispered a prayer, but that only seemed to anger the specter, who let out a piercing scream that made the walls tremble and extinguished the candle completely. Plunged into total darkness, the young people tried to flee, but the church door seemed sealed shut. The lady's wail grew louder, and suddenly one of the boys collapsed to the floor, his body stiff as if trapped in a nightmare. Desperate, Angela remembered the stories she'd heard. They said the woman was the lady of the monastery, a young woman who had died on Good Friday, centuries ago, after her fiancé abandoned her to become a monk. Since then, the lady wandered through Rascafria, appearing every Good Friday to seek company and mourn her loss. Finally, someone managed to force the door open, and the group ran toward the village. When they arrived, they found one of the village elders, Don Fermin, who, seeing them pale and trembling, instantly knew what had happened. "Were you in the church?" he asked, his eyes stern, his voice barely a whisper. "I told you no one should go there tonight." The young people nodded, terrified and regretful. Don Fermin muttered a prayer, and before dawn broke, he led them back to the church to perform a purification ritual, hoping to calm the lady's spirit. That same afternoon, as the village awoke, everyone already knew the story, and from that day on, no one in Rascafria dared approach the church on Good Friday. It was said that the lady remained there, waiting, seeking those who would dare to interrupt her eternal lament. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, Let's continue. In a secluded corner of the city, Viviano lived in an old manor on the outskirts. His life, simple and austere, aligned with his religious habits. Every Easter week, silence ruled his home, and he dedicated the days to prayer and reflection. However, one particular Easter week in the 1960s, something dark and mysterious happened, something Viviano could never explain rationally, though he was never the same afterward. Good Friday began like any other. Viviano had just returned from church, where he had attended the Passion ceremony. Once home, he prepared a frugal, simple meal, fitting for the day's solemnity. He was accompanied by his younger sister, Anna, who visited to share in those days of quiet devotion. Midway through the afternoon, as the warmth became dense and oppressive, there was a soft knock at the front door. Viviano approached cautiously, and upon opening it, he found a gaunt, hunched man dressed in faded, dirty clothing. His expression was distant, almost faded, as though his mind wandered in another realm. In a low murmur, the stranger asked for a little food and water. Without hesitation, Viviano nodded and went to the kitchen to prepare something. Meanwhile, Anna, uneasy, watched the visitor from a corner of the dining room. Viviano served him a slice of bread, a piece of cheese, and a glass of cool water. Returning to the entryway, he noticed the man staring intently at the crucifix on the wall, his gaze vacant yet fixed, as if recognizing something in it. When Viviano handed him the food, the man murmured his thanks, took the bread and water, and remained standing there, as though waiting for something more. The man's presence felt almost unreal, and as they observed him, it was as though time had halted in that small room. After a few silent moments, the stranger inclined his head toward Viviano and spoke in a grave tone. "Thank you, friend. Not everyone is willing to share the little they have." With one last look at the crucifix, he turned and left through the front door. Viviano and Anna stood in silence, watching the figure slowly disappear down the dirt path. Barely a minute later, Viviano went to the window to look for the man, but he was already gone. Anna, eyes wide, whispered, "There's no way he could have left so quickly." That night, restlessness would not leave them. Anna began to feel a chill in the room, as if the man's presence had left an invisible mark. Viviano, unable to shake the sense that something inexplicable had occurred, tried to calm himself by reading a psalm, yet a strange heaviness continued to press on his chest. At midnight, thunder rumbled, and rain began to fall fiercely. Suddenly, a creak at the back door made them both jump. They exchanged glances, their faces pale under the faint light of the oil lamp. Without thinking, Viviano rose and went to the door. Through the foggy glass, he could make out a silhouette, standing still in the rain. Despite his growing fear, he opened the door. There, on the threshold, was the man from that afternoon, soaked and staring straight at him. Without speaking, the man extended his hand, and not knowing why, Viviano returned the empty glass. The man offered a haunting smile and vanished, as if swallowed by the night. Viviano remained silent, frozen in place. Slowly, he closed the door and returned to Anna, who looked at him with barely restrained terror. "That man, I saw him in a dream before I arrived here," she whispered. "It's as though he was asking for something, seeking redemption." The two spent the rest of the night awake, unable to sleep, feeling as if an invisible force was watching them. At dawn, Viviano and Anna decided to search for the man, or at least discover who he was. They visited nearby areas, asking neighbors if anyone had seen him, describing his appearance in detail. No one remembered seeing him, either before or after that day. The thought that he might not belong to this world began to settle in their minds, though neither dared say it aloud. Days later, while visiting the church, Viviano found an old painting hidden in one of the side rooms of the main nave. As he looked at it, he felt his blood run cold. The image depicted a man on his knees, in an attitude of humility and resignation, facing a figure of the resurrected Christ. The man's face was the same as that of the stranger who had asked for food in his home. Viviano stood there, paralyzed, a feeling of both anguish and peace washing over him. That night back home, Viviano couldn't sleep. Something within him told him that the apparition had been a sign, a warning. He tried to pray, but a strange thought crossed his mind. What if it was Christ himself who came to test my compassion? He felt a deep chill and with a sudden impulse went out to the yard under the starry sky. He knelt on the damp earth and through tears asked forgiveness for his doubts and promised to give more of himself to others. Since then, Viviano never saw the man again, nor found any explanation for what had happened. Yet every Easter week, he felt a presence surround him, as if the visitor were still watching, awaiting the fulfillment of his promise. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. In the 1960s, a young priest named Prudenciano was assigned to a parish in a remote village, barely inhabited by 200 people. This small settlement, nestled among mountains and difficult trails, held an air of mystery that Prudenciano sensed immediately. As a newly ordained priest with medical training, the bishop considered him the perfect man for a community with superstitious beliefs, which aligned well with his skepticism toward the supernatural. With a mix of unease and curiosity, Prudenciano packed his belongings and embarked on the long journey to the settlement, where a humble chapel and an expectant community awaited him. Upon his arrival, the villagers welcomed him enthusiastically, grateful to finally have a religious figure to tend to their souls. In the following weeks, Prudenciano adapted to the routine of the place. He organized masses, provided first aid, and gradually improved the conditions of the chapel. However, as Easter week approached, the atmosphere in the village began to change. Conversations that once revolved around daily matters were now filled with unsettling whispers about the arrival of the Weeping Virgin. Prudenciano, ever the skeptic, listened to these stories with doubt, though he could not help but notice the seriousness with which the locals spoke. Just nights before Good Friday, a young villager asked Father Prudenciano if he would be able to drive away the Virgin. To his surprise, an elderly woman intervened, warning him of the danger posed by that apparition, which they claimed had manifested every Easter week for several years. Prudenciano dismissed the tale, believing it to be mere folklore. Yet the testimonies aligned. The apparition appeared in the dead of night, weeping with a lament so haunting that it froze the blood of those who heard it. Almost everyone claimed it had taken 2 boys in previous years, whisking them away into the mountains without a trace. Prudenciano tried to reassure the villagers, reminding them that faith should not lean toward superstition. However, on the night of Good Friday, a palpable tension gripped the place. As soon as the ceremony ended, the villagers quickly retreated to their homes, locking doors and windows, pleading with the priest to remain in his quarters until dawn. The warning of an older woman echoed in his mind. "Don't go out, Father. That night, no one is safe in the mountains." Settled in the small room behind the chapel, Prudenciano tried to distract himself with his books. Yet the silence outside was almost absolute, a silence so thick it felt suffocating. It was then that a faint lament broke the calm, barely perceptible but unmistakable. Prudenciano paused, his pulse quickening, struggling to convince himself it was merely the wind. However, the sound repeated, clearer this time, a deep sob, laden with sadness and desolation. Feeling a chill run down his spine, the priest rose and cautiously stepped outside. What he saw froze his blood. A tall, thin figure, shrouded in a dark cloak, stood a few meters from the chapel, enveloped in darkness. Though its silhouette vaguely resembled a virgin, it emanated a sinister and unnatural energy. In front of it, a village boy, around 10 years old, seemed entranced, unable to move or tear his gaze from the apparition. His mother, barely visible in the shadows, screamed in desperation, but her voice failed to break the spell. Unsure of what to do, Prudenciano began to recite the Hail Mary aloud as he slowly approached the boy. Each word felt heavy in the air, as if an invisible force were trying to stop him. The figure turned to face him, and then he saw its eyes, hollow and dark, with only a trace of a viscous red liquid that resembled tears of blood. Prudenciano continued praying, gripping his rosary tightly, even as fear and despair constricted his throat, suffocating him. The apparition let out a scream so profound that Prudenciano dropped the rosary for a moment, clutching his ears. It was a wail not of this world, a cry from an ancient pain so deep that it seemed forgotten by the very earth. The figure, ignoring his prayers, approached the boy, caressed his face, and picked him up. The child fell into a deep faint, as if his life had been ripped away, and the mother collapsed to the ground in despair. Before he could react, Prudenciano watched as the figure glided slowly toward the mountains, the boy still in its arms, disappearing among the trees, as if the very thicket had swallowed it whole. That night, no one could sleep in the village, and at dawn, a thorough search was organized, proving fruitless. The boy had vanished without a trace, just like in the previous years. Moved and terrified, Prudenciano reported what had occurred to the bishop. However, lacking evidence and facing the skepticism of ecclesiastical authorities, his account was received with reservations. Though he was permitted to request a transfer, Prudenciano chose to stay. He knew that this phenomenon exceeded human comprehension, something dark and ancient that loomed over the village each Good Friday, claiming innocent souls. Since then, Father Prudenciano established preventive measures. He advised each family to lock their doors and remain inside during Easter week. He forbade children from going out at night and kept watch every Good Friday, hoping that the apparition would not take another life. Although he never comprehended the origin of that entity, Prudenciano understood that the supernatural had settled in that forgotten land. As the years passed, the village grew, and the tale of the Dark Virgin became a warning passed down through generations. No one dared to challenge tradition, for those few who did paid the highest price. The legend of the Weeping Virgin that roamed every Easter week became etched in the community's memory, a sinister echo that would forever resonate in the mountains. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. When I was 17, my mom landed a big job in another part of the country, so we had to move. For me, it was a massive and tough change, especially leaving behind my mates and the school where I'd grown up. Despite the distance, I kept in touch with my 3 best friends, Leo, Dante, and Bruno. Every Friday night, we'd catch up on Zoom calls just to keep the connection alive. One ordinary night, everything took a terrifying turn because of a video Bruno shared in the chat. It was a normal Friday, about 11 p.m. My parents were already asleep, and I was alone in my room. Most of the call was just us chatting about the Continental Football Tournament happening that year. Just as we were about to log off, Bruno dropped a question out of nowhere. "Hey, you lot want to see something pretty weird?" Dante jumped in, eager. "Yeah, what have you got?" Without a word, Bruno sent a file. I opened it, and what I saw sent chills down my spine. A man tied to a stretcher, while another bloke, wearing a mask straight out of a horror film, was slicing off his skin with a scalpel like he was skinning an animal. The guy was awake, screaming endlessly. The video only lasted a few seconds, but it was enough to make me leap out of my chair, stomach twisting. Leo shouted immediately, "What the hell, Bruno? Where'd you get that crap from?" I was frozen, speechless from the shock. When I finally managed to type, all I could say was, "Don't ever send me crap like that again." Even though the footage looked disturbingly real, I tried to convince myself it was just some low-budget gore flick. I couldn't fathom it being genuine. Leo pressed again, "Bruno, where the hell did that come from?" Bruno hesitated, but eventually wrote, "I'll tell you, but you've got to promise this stays between us. Seriously." There was a heavy silence until Dante muttered, "Don't tell me you filmed that yourself." Bruno laughed. "Don't be daft. Of course not. I don't have the guts." We all let out nervous laughs. But then Bruno admitted, "I found it on the dark web." I'd heard about it, a shadowy corner of the internet where illegal stuff gets traded, but I never imagined such twisted content really existed. Then Bruno shared a photo. It was a woman without limbs, tagged doll number 27, with a chilling description of the procedures done before delivering her to a client. That image churned my stomach. Still, I struggled to accept it as real. So I asked Bruno straight up, "How long have you been into this stuff? Why do you even go on those sites?" He answered, "Only sometimes, out of curiosity." But before he could finish, someone else joined the video chat. "Who's that?" we all asked at once. "No idea. I swear," Bruno said, visibly rattled. I tried to leave the call, but my mouse cursor wouldn't move. It was completely frozen. Then the unknown user's camera switched on. They were wearing a pig mask, but not a cheap plastic one. It looked like a real face, skinned and stitched back on. So grotesque, it looked like a nightmare come to life. "Tell me you see the same thing I do," I typed, my fingers shaking. Bruno kept insisting it wasn't a prank. You could tell he was freaking out. The pig man crept slowly towards the camera, and I felt his gaze pierce through the screen. My friend's video feeds froze. Only his image stayed live. Suddenly he spoke, in a low, deliberate voice. "Hello, can you see me? Say you can." I recoiled, terrified. I barely managed to stammer. "What? What do you want?" He replied, "You know that bored feeling when life's just a routine? That's why I'm always hunting for something new, someone new. And today, I think I found what I was looking for." Then muffled moans echoed. The man swung the camera around to reveal a woman without arms or legs, gagged and chained. She was struggling desperately to break free. Seconds later, the pig man raised a huge axe and started moving toward her. I began shaking uncontrollably, hyperventilating. I screamed, "Leave her alone, I'm calling the police." Then the image got even worse. I recognized her. She was the same woman from the photo Bruno had shared earlier. I heard the blows. I jumped out of my chair and it crashed to the floor. I covered my eyes, crying harder than ever before. The horror was unbearable. And then, silence. Everything went still. I lifted my hands from my face and looked at the screen. The pig man was gone. The video call had ended. I was frozen, trembling. It felt like a nightmare, but it wasn't. It was real. I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and when I came back, I typed in the chat, "Tell me you all saw that too." Everyone confirmed. Their devices had frozen too, and they'd all seen the pig man. No one said much after that. From that day on, we made a pact. Never speak of it again, but those images never left my mind. To this day, I still have nightmares, reliving that video. I wake up drenched in sweat, gripped by the same terror from that night. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. What I'm about to tell you weighs on my conscience like a slab of concrete. I'm not proud of it at all. A few years ago, I fell victim to a digital scam that, without getting into the details, left me completely ruined. I was drowning in debt, desperate to find any way to get out of that nightmare. It was during that desperate hunt for survival that I ended up tangled in a criminal network operating in what they call the dark web. Even now, guilt still gnaws at me for being complicit in what I'm about to share, but I know the circumstances don't excuse me from responsibility. 5 years ago, I was just an ordinary person with a decent job and a life without too many surprises. I worked as a nurse's assistant in a public clinic in my country, just enough to pay for food, rent, and transport. Then one bad day, a so-called friend convinced me to invest all my savings into an online platform promising to multiply my money fast. I lost everything. I'd fallen for a scam. Suddenly, I was broke, directionless. At that clinic, there was a doctor who was a mystery to everyone. A respected figure in the medical world with international publications and experience in prestigious hospitals. Yet, out of nowhere, he appeared working in our underfunded clinic, where the pay was a fraction of what he could have earned elsewhere. No one understood why, but everyone respected his reputation. Some thought it was pure vocation, others suspected something darker. I was so desperate back then that I accepted any extra shift they offered. Everyone knew if there was money involved, I was available. And it was in that context that, one day, out of the blue, the doctor called me. It surprised me. We barely exchanged words before. He asked me to join him for lunch. We went to a small restaurant with no one else around except the staff, who seemed to know him well. During that meal, he asked personal questions about my family, my debts, my expenses. I told him about the scam. Then he dropped a question that froze me. How much would you need to make a month to never worry about money again? I thought it was some kind of romantic hint, but there wasn't a shred of flirtation in his tone. I felt confused. I gave him some number and he simply replied, "What would you be willing to do if I paid you triple?" I was speechless. He stared at me, serious, almost sinister. I remembered something my grandfather used to say, opportunities don't come twice. So, even though I had no idea what I was getting into, I told him I was willing to consider it. Then he started explaining. He had contacts, 2 other doctors, several nurses, and someone from the morgue who had already left. He said I wouldn't need to work directly in their operation, but I could move around the hospital unnoticed. What he described next left me frozen. When a birth ended with a stillborn baby, the doctors in his network manipulated things to convince another mother, whose baby was born healthy, that her child had also died. Both families would see the same corpse. The nurse in on it arranged everything, so no one suspected a thing. My job was to duplicate records. 2 birth certificates for the same baby. One real, one fake. Then I had to take the living newborn out through a back exit to a black van waiting nearby, hand the baby over, return like nothing happened, and carry on with my day. I wanted to know what happened to the babies. Before I could ask, he cut me off like he already knew, said he didn't care, that they were sold on the dark web, making thousands per child, enough to pay everyone involved and still make a huge profit. I was terrified. I wanted to run, but I'd already heard too much. I asked what would happen if I refused. His answer was cold. Once you're in, you only get out dead. Scared out of my mind, I agreed. And just like that, without realizing it, I became part of that sick machine. I wasn't working directly in the trafficking, but I was a cog in the wheel. The first time was a nightmare. I felt sick. But when the doctor handed me $500 cash at the end of the shift, the guilt dulled, at least for a while. It wasn't daily, but there was a month I earned $2,000. Sometimes I was paid just to look the other way during certain procedures. The worst part is how you get used to it. Over time, I stopped feeling anything. I became someone I didn't even recognize. It all ended abruptly a couple of years ago. One night, I left the morgue to deliver a baby. Everything was going as usual until gunshots rang out. The van sped off and several men in plain clothes surrounded me. They shoved me into a white car, blindfolded, gagged, and tied me up. I spent nearly 3 hours in that car. Then they took me to a house. Tied to a chair, they interrogated me. I'd rather not relive what happened there. It was days of pure terror. On the third day, someone claiming to be a cybercrime agent showed up. He gave me 2 options: cooperate or disappear. I knew I had no way out. The organization must have known I'd been caught. Leaving without protection would mean death. I cooperated. Thanks to my testimony, they caught the doctor and part of his network. But we were just a branch of something much bigger. Now I live under protection, along with others who decided to speak up. But I know they could find me at any moment. And when that happens, it will be the end. Like they say, karma never forgets. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. It all started when I met Laura back in 6th form. From day one, there was this intense connection between us. It was one of those stories that sounds like it's straight out of a movie. Love at first sight. Not long after, we were dating, and before we knew it, we made things official. Laura was incredible, and over the years, our bond only grew stronger. In nearly 7 years together, we'd never been apart. We even chose the same university course just so we could spend more time together. I know it might sound a bit codependent, but it worked for us. A couple of years ago, we decided to take the next step. We wanted to get married. But as anyone who's planned a wedding knows, it costs more than you expect. I was thinking something small and intimate. Laura dreamed of a bigger celebration, surrounded by friends, family, and colleagues. Though it wasn't exactly what I'd imagined, seeing her happy was enough. The problem was, we didn't have the money, which delayed everything. Still, we started saving, full of hope and excitement. Then a few months later, Laura got a tempting job offer, just what we needed to cover the wedding costs. The catch? She had to move to South Korea for 4 months to work as a consultant for a startup. It was a big challenge. Neither of us had ever been apart that long, let alone on different continents. At first, I was dead against it, but I realized I couldn't stand in the way of something so important for her growth. Plus, it was only 4 months. I kept telling myself that over and over. The only thing that calmed me was knowing she wouldn't be completely alone. Soon after arriving, she told me a colleague had offered to share a flat with her. Her name was Yuna. She was Japanese, and Laura introduced her to me via video call. She seemed nice, which gave me some peace of mind. The time difference was tough. I got used to staying up late so we could talk after her workday. We always spoke at the same time. 3 a.m. for me, 5 p.m. for her. One day, she excitedly told me there was going to be a costume party at work, and she was going with Yuna. I thought that was great. She deserved some fun. That night, as usual, I stayed up waiting for her call, but it never came. I started to worry, though I tried to convince myself she was just tired. To distract myself, I opened a Facebook group for expats in Korea that I followed. There, I found a strange post. If you're thinking of traveling to Korea, watch this first. It had a link. I don't usually click on things like that, but something pushed me to this time. When I clicked, a terrible quality video started playing. It showed a blonde woman, naked, hands tied, wearing a white mask with the word slave written on it. I thought it was some sick prank, so I tried to close it, but the file kept reopening over and over. Eventually, I let it play. Then a man wearing a Japanese demon mask and holding a katana appeared. I still thought it was some kind of setup until something happened that I can't erase from my mind. The woman screamed, begged, pleaded. The man looked at the camera, then silently cut her in half. It wasn't an effect. It was real. I froze. My whole body trembled. I couldn't breathe. And worst of all, I couldn't stop thinking about Laura. I tried calling her, once, twice, 20 times. No answer. I called Yuna. Nothing. Then I remembered Laura had posted photos from the party just hours earlier. Seeing those, I felt a bit relieved. She was surrounded by people, smiling. But then I noticed something chilling. In the background of several pictures among the crowd, there was someone wearing the same mask as in the video. The same man, watching closely. I panicked. I screamed. I called her number over and over, no reply. Then finally I got a video call. It was Laura. When I answered, pure terror hit me. Laura and Yuna stood at the edge of a bed, tied up, wearing the same masks as in the video. Next to them was the same masked man with the katana. I started shouting, "Leave them alone! I'm going to call the police!" He didn't respond. Instead, he moved closer to the camera, nodded, and held up a sign that read, "Let's make a deal." Through tears and desperation, I begged him not to hurt them. He showed another sheet with bank details and a clear message. "You have 10 minutes to transfer $2,000 or both will disappear." With shaking hands, I made the transfer. I used the savings we had for the wedding. When I showed him the confirmation, he came back to the camera with another note. "If you call the police, she dies." Then he ended the call. I never heard from Laura again. One day passed. 2. 3. I was losing my mind. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't think straight. Then on the 4th day, someone knocked on the door. It was her. Laura was standing there, alive. I held her as tight as I could. We cried for minutes, but she never wanted to tell me what happened. Every time I bring it up or ask about Yuna, she just pulls away. We agreed not to speak of it and to carry on with our lives. It's been 5 years now. We got married, had a daughter, and moved on. But deep down, that night left its mark on us, like a shadow we avoid looking at. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. The story I'm about to share with you isn't just chilling, it's deeply tragic. Even now, years later, it still hurts to remember. Almost a decade ago, I landed a job as inventory manager at a large warehouse on the outskirts of town. That's where I met Laura, a woman in her 30s who worked with me in the textiles department. We weren't close friends, but we shared plenty of chats during afternoon shifts. She was friendly, had a great sense of humor, and always seemed upbeat. Laura was originally from Ecuador. She'd moved to Canada with her young son, only 7 years old. Her whole family stayed back home, so she was raising him as a single mother with a lot of responsibility. She was usually one of the first to arrive and often the last to leave. In nearly 2 years on the job, she'd never missed a day. So when she didn't show up one morning, I was surprised. I asked a colleague if she'd seen her the day before. She had. Then I checked with our supervisor, who said Laura hadn't called or given any notice. It seemed odd, but I didn't think much of it. We worked together, but I didn't know much about her personal life. Maybe something had come up with her son or some other emergency. Days passed. 1, 2, 3, and Laura still didn't return. Nobody knew where she was. I didn't have her address, only her phone number, which I called repeatedly with no answer. A couple of days later, I noticed a group of coworkers gathered around a phone. I went over, and what I saw froze me to the bone. A video of Laura recorded by herself. She looked terrified. She placed the phone on the dashboard of her car and was speaking in broken sentences, saying she'd just driven through a lonely rural area and spotted a dark van partly hidden in the woods. Out of curiosity, she'd stopped and seen two men unloading large black bags from the van into another car. One of the bags tore open, spilling its contents onto the ground. Human remains. Arms, legs, even heads. Laura was panicked. She'd sent the video privately to a close friend on Facebook, but her friend hadn't seen it until much later because she rarely checked her account. The creepy part? Laura's last online activity was recorded about 3 hours after sending the video. Then, silence. The friend went to Laura's home, but no one was there. A neighbor mentioned that days before, Laura and her son had left in a black transport van and hadn't been seen since. We immediately alerted the authorities. Laura had no family here, so it was just us co-workers who noticed she was missing. 2 days later, a cleaning crew member found a suspicious bag in a dumpster near the warehouse. Inside were dismembered human remains. Forensic analysis later confirmed they were Laura's. We were all in shock. It was impossible to believe something like that could happen to someone so close. But the question that haunted us the most was, what happened to her son? The friend who received the video decided to share it publicly on social media, hoping someone might recognize something, identify the culprits, any clue. What happened next was even more disturbing. One comment read, "Poor woman, she crossed paths with the dark web collectors. She saw things she shouldn't have. Of course they came for her." Another, even more chilling. "I hope she had no family, because they probably ended up the same, or worse." That last comment had hundreds of replies. I started reading through them one by one. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. Several people claimed that what Laura had seen was one of the so-called mobile units operating for criminal networks tied to the dark web. These vans supposedly traveled through major cities, collecting people or bodies sold at underground auctions. Men and women, but mostly women and children, were treated like merchandise. Some stories even said parents sold their own kids. It was incomprehensible and disgusting. But the worst part? Comments said Laura's video had mysteriously disappeared, and anyone trying to talk about the case was silenced. Some even said it never reached the media, despite police involvement. The most horrifying truth was that in the end, we found out what happened to Laura. But no one, not even the police, could find her son. I never imagined something so awful could happen to someone I knew. But the worst part was realizing, much later, that I'd come dangerously close to that world myself. This happened when I was 17. Back then, people were just starting to talk about the so-called deep web. A classmate of mine, Leo, was pretty tech-savvy for his age. He claimed there were disturbing things hidden there. I never believed him until curiosity got the better of me. I asked if he could show me how to access it. Leo promised to send me a link once he got home. That very night, I got the message. When I opened it, there was a strange search engine and a list of categories on the side. Everything imaginable. One link caught my eye, something about exotic cooking. I clicked, just out of morbid curiosity. On screen was a guy dressed as a chef in a professional kitchen. He had lots of ingredients laid out. In the chat, people seemed excited about what he was going to prepare. Over 2,000 viewers were connected. I thought it was some weird animal dish. The chef started chopping onions, celery, carrots, until he revealed the main ingredient. When he opened the fridge, my heart nearly stopped. He pulled out a human leg, complete foot and all. I jumped up and almost threw up. The man laughed as he chopped it and threw it into a pot. The chat was a mix of euphoria and madness. I tried to tell myself it was a prank or fake props, but it wasn't. It was real. I shut off the computer, called Leo in anger, and yelled at him for exposing me to that. He just laughed. Told me the worst part was that many of those dishes were actually for sale. I I remembered comments like, "Can't wait for my order to arrive." Since that day, I never clicked on links like that again, not even once out of curiosity. That image still haunts me in every nightmare. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. A few years ago, I made a mistake so serious I wish with all my heart I could take it back. One of those decisions you can't undo, something no amount of regret could ever make right. It all started when Clara broke up with me. I was just 19 at the time and completely in love with her. To most, it might sound like the typical case of a heartbroken teenager doing something stupid. And that's exactly what it was, except the consequences turned out to be much darker than I ever imagined. We'd been together for 2 years. Our relationship was intense but full of ups and downs. We were young, impulsive, and we argued a lot, usually over the dumbest things. But somehow, we always managed to patch things up, until one day, we didn't. One afternoon, I found out Clara had been cheating on me with another guy. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. She just said she didn't feel the same anymore, that she'd fallen for him, and that she was sorry. Hearing that felt like getting punched in the chest. But what hurt most was knowing she'd stayed with me while secretly seeing someone else. She could have been honest, could have talked to me, but she didn't. What really broke me was finding out through other people. She knew it would humiliate me, and still let it happen. I'd been loyal to her, bet everything on that relationship, and all I got in return were lies and betrayal. I was crushed, but beyond the heartbreak, something deeper started to take over. Resentment. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't think straight. I was drowning in this heavy, tangled mess of grief and rage that left me shaking. That's when I made the worst decision of my life. I opened my laptop and decided to dive into a corner of the internet I'd only ever heard whispers about, the dark web. I wasn't some tech wizard or anything, but in that moment, all I cared about was finding a way to make her pay. I never said it out loud, but deep down, I knew exactly what I wanted: revenge. After hours of digging through shady forums, dead links, and obvious traps, I stumbled upon something different. A forum called The Unholy. The name sounded ridiculous, but its tagline pulled me in. Someone wronged you? Add their name to the list. We'll handle the rest. It felt like the perfect opportunity. I still had private photos of Clara, personal stuff from our relationship. I'm not proud of it, but in the state I was in, using them felt justified. Once inside, I realized this wasn't just some gossip board or place for angry rants. The site was divided into sections called bounties, but not the good kind. Each bounty was a different kind of punishment for people the users claimed deserved it. One section was titled The Old Man's Gift, like some twisted holiday joke. I chuckled at the absurdity of the name, probably why I didn't take it seriously enough. There was a form asking for details: name, age, city, social media links. I filled it all in, shaking with anger, uploaded the photos. I didn't include any videos only because the site didn't allow it. But in my mind, it was enough. After submitting, a spinning wheel popped up, decked out in cheesy Christmas lights. It was grotesque and ironic. I spun it. It landed on Ultimate Justice. I laughed. I figured it was just some dumb game mechanic, a joke. The site asked me to confirm the info. I double-checked. Everything was there. I hit send. The next screen was unsettling. A blank white page with one line. "Thanks for adding a new name. The old man will take care of it. Relax. Punishment is on the way. He knows who's been naughty." It creeped me out. Sounded like a bad parody of a Christmas story. Still, I didn't take it seriously. I thought at most her photos would be posted, some cruel comments would follow, and she'd finally feel what I had felt: shame. The thought gave me a twisted sense of justice. I told myself she deserved it, that she'd played with my feelings, and now it was her turn to pay. But nothing happened. Not the next day, not the week after. Her social stayed the same. No leaks, no messages, nothing. I was confused and, honestly, relieved. As the days went by, a different kind of unease crept in. It wasn't just guilt, it was fear. Some part of me began to suspect that this site wasn't what it seemed. It wasn't just a platform for exposing people. It was something darker, deeper, something I hadn't fully understood. And then Clara disappeared. No one knew what happened. Her family reported her missing. She never came back. I tried to convince myself it was just a horrible coincidence, that the forum was all smoke and mirrors, that none of it had any real power. But I've never been sure. What I did was unforgivable. I can't rewind time, I can't delete what I sent, or deny what I intended. All I have now is the weight of remorse, and the terrifying possibility that I set something in motion far worse than I ever imagined. I should have never sought revenge. I should have never crossed that line. And if anyone out there reads this and ever feels that dark urge to hurt the one who broke their heart, please, walk away. It's not worth it. You have no idea what you might be messing with. After that, everything changed forever. Not just because Emma vanished, not even because of the terrible news of her death, but because that experience opened my eyes in a way I never imagined. I realized the pain I felt wasn't just from the loss, but from what I had been capable of doing, driven by resentment and selfishness. Every night, when darkness wraps around me, I feel her absence like a weight I can't bear, a hollow ache that nothing can fill. And it's not just guilt that eats away at me. It's fear, too. A deep fear. Fear of who I am, of what I might become if I don't learn to rein in this rage that's burning me up from the inside. I've tried to seek help, even from the shadows, because I know I need some kind of redemption, even if it's just a sliver. But I also know there are wounds that never heal, and some mistakes leave scars that never fade. I can't change the past. I can't bring her back. I can't undo the damage I caused, but I can swear this much. From now on, I'll try to be better. I won't let hatred steer my actions anymore. Because if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that revenge only destroys, and the chains of bitterness end up locking us inside our own prisons. Deep down, I'm still the same broken man, only now with a heavier burden. The awareness that what I did had real consequences, and that living with that memory will be my eternal punishment. The last time I heard her name on the news, I knew I'd never forget her, and I knew I'd never forgive myself. But maybe one day, somewhere, I'll find a little peace. Until then, all I have is the echo of her smile and the weight of my guilt, reminding me every single day that the path I chose was the wrong one. And so, with hope shattered and my soul in ruins, I keep going, paying the price for a choice I made without even realizing it. Because sometimes, the harshest punishment isn't a prison cell or the judgment of others. It's the sentence we carry within ourselves. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. I never imagined blood could have any real value beyond just saving lives. When I tried to donate at a blood bank, all I ever got was a few biscuits or a glass of juice. Back then, university was a lot more expensive than I'd anticipated. Instant noodles and ramen had become my staple diet, and every day was a struggle to keep my job while juggling work and studies. One night, I dove deeper and deeper into the hidden corners of the internet, the so-called dark web. I had this strange fascination with seeing what those underground shops sold, though I never bought a thing. Besides, I didn't have the dosh to spare. That's when I stumbled upon a link that read, "Paid blood donors wanted, payments in cryptocurrency." It really caught my eye, so I clicked through. The site listed blood types with prices per 100 milliliters, and the payments were surprisingly generous. I found out my blood type, O negative, was especially valuable, with offers of $25 per 100 milliliters, while common types barely fetched a penny. There was a form for those interested in selling their blood, asking only for blood type, email address, and any medical conditions. Without much thought, I filled it out and sent my details. Then I carried on browsing other shops, cheekily checking prices for rare and exotic meds, although I had no real intention of buying. For a fleeting moment, I entertained the mad idea of becoming a dodgy pharmaceutical dealer, just for a laugh. Minutes later, I got an email with the subject, "Blood for Cryptocurrency." It was a reply to my form. It read something like, "Thank you for your interest. If your blood type is eligible, please send your crypto wallet address and your physical address. On the upcoming Tuesday, place a vial with 100 milliliters of blood in your mailbox before midnight, and we will collect it. After pickup, we will transfer $25 in cryptocurrency to your wallet. Failure to leave the blood or substandard samples will result in no further communication." There were also links to buy a home blood extraction kit and to a video tutorial. I thought this might actually be legit, so I replied asking if I could deliver the sample to a different address instead of leaving it in my own mailbox. They said no, because transport and temperature changes would ruin the blood, so it had to go in the mailbox. I wasn't comfortable with that, but luckily, my elderly neighbor next door probably wouldn't mind if I used his. I sent them that neighbor's address along with my digital wallet details. The next day, the kit arrived via Amazon. The week flew by, and finally, Tuesday night came. Around 9 p.m., when I was sure the neighbors were asleep, I put what I'd learned in the tutorial into practice. The extraction wasn't tricky since I'd donated blood before and had some experience. I filled a 120 milliliter vial, dabbed a bit of cotton on the prick, and sneaked out to drop the vial into the neighbor's mailbox. Then I hurried back inside, making sure no one saw me. Everything was quiet. Perfect. I stayed up, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever would come to collect the blood. I knew they wouldn't turn up before midnight, so I kept myself busy scrolling through my phone and social media. At 1 a.m., I noticed the streetlight flicker and saw a tall figure dressed head to toe in black crossing the pavement. They approached the mailbox, opened it, and took the vial. Their skin was so pale it looked almost ghostly. They briefly inspected the sample and, apparently satisfied, turned around and vanished into the darkness. I felt strangely uneasy, but also excited about getting paid for something I'd only ever given away for free until then. I turned off the lights and went to bed, though my mind was full of questions about what they were actually doing with my blood. The next morning, a new email arrived. "Delicious. I'll collect 200 milliliters next Tuesday. Do not reply, your payment has been sent." I checked my wallet and sure enough, there was a bit over 25 pounds in cryptocurrency. I felt a strange mix of emotions, happiness about the money, but also a bit unsettled by the tone of the message. Were they literally feeding off my blood? The idea was bonkers, but the cash was too good to pass up. The week flew by, and once again, on Tuesday evening, I left 2 vials in the letterbox. The tall, pale figure showed up again and took the blood. The following morning, my wallet had grown by another 50 pounds. Another email arrived, this time more direct. "Delicious. I want more." They were asking for 500 milliliters. That was terrifying, but by then the gig was worth too much to quit. 2 months' worth of food and rent were on the line, plus the chance to buy some new clothes and a video game or two. It didn't matter if the person was literally feasting on my blood. The money was enough to make me overlook the creepy bit. I ordered more vials off Amazon and waited anxiously. This time I prepared 5 jars. Seeing so much blood leave my body felt surreal, far more than I'd ever donated before. Even with experience, doing it alone made me nervous. I felt a bit dizzy and my pulse was shaking. Still, I went through with it, left the vials in my neighbor's letterbox, and as usual, saw the pale, hooded figure appear to collect them. The payment came through on time the next morning, along with a brief email that just said, "Delicious. Next time, make it a liter." Reading that chilled me to the bone. A liter was a huge amount, but the sum offered, over £4,000, was tempting. I looked it up online and confirmed it was possible to give that much, though with serious risks. I'd already donated almost a liter over the past few weeks, but I decided to carry on. I ordered 10 more vials, telling myself it would be the last time for a good while so I could recover. The day arrived, and after 7 vials, I started feeling weak, pale, almost on the verge of fainting. By the time I finished the 10th vial, I was shaking uncontrollably. I sat down, put a cold compress on my head, and drank some water. I spent nearly an hour still as a statue, fighting to stay conscious. Eventually, I mustered the strength, took the vials to the mailbox, and left them there. The man appeared like a ghost, grinned with a twisted smirk, checked the blood, and vanished into the darkness. When I woke up, I checked my Bitcoin wallet. The transfer had gone through. But the next message was even more unsettling. Delicious. We fancy another liter next Tuesday. There was no way I could do it again, let alone so soon. I replied asking for a break to recover, but the response was a veiled threat. A liter next Tuesday or else. That, or else, chilled me to the bone. I didn't know what it meant, but I was certain it wasn't good. I tried to back out, but the message kept coming, always with that implicit threat. I shut down my computer and sank into a state of fear and paranoia. The following Tuesday, I didn't draw any blood. I sat in the dark by the window. At exactly 1 o'clock, the figure appeared, dashed to the mailbox, lifted the lid, and instead of taking anything, started frantically rifling through the letters. Then it let out a hoarse whistle, like a scream of despair, and stared up at the sky. It fixed its gaze on my window. Terror rooted me to the spot. Its pale skin, dark eyes, and the complete lack of eyebrows gave it an utterly inhuman look. Finally, it turned, crossed the neighbor's garden, and broke into their house through a side window. Shortly after, I heard blood-curdling screams and gunshots. I rushed outside and was horrified to see my neighbor lying dead on the floor, with bullet wounds and deep marks on his neck, as if some wild animal had attacked him. The creature escaped through the broken window and vanished into the nearby woods just as the sirens wailed closer. The police cordoned off the scene, and although they questioned every neighbor, I couldn't bring myself to tell them what I knew without incriminating myself. I knew it was my fault. I'd put that blood in the mailbox, and that's why my neighbor was dead. Guilt and fear gnawed away at me. The next day, every trace of my communication with that entity had disappeared from my inbox. It was as if it had never existed. Yet at the crime scene, the police found traces of a whitish body paint, the same as the figure seemed to have on its skin. That's when I realized the being wasn't some supernatural vampire, but a psychopath with delusions and dangerous methods. I never heard from it again, and I never spoke to the police. I just wanted to get as far away from that nightmare and the deep darkness I'd uncovered online. Sometimes, on the quietest nights, I still think about that figure and the vial of blood that left an indelible mark on my life, and what might have happened if I'd kept feeding its demands. Since then, I've lived with a silent dread, aware that some shadows are better left unlit. The experience taught me that some secrets are far too dark to be dug up, and that the price of curiosity can be far higher than any material gain. That mix of terror and guilt haunts me, reminding me that not all that glitters is gold, and some offers, no matter how tempting, hide an abyss best not peered into. Though I never found out what that creature truly was, or what might have happened if I'd refused from the start, I know that spilled blood, and that death marked a point of no return. The deep web showed me its darkest, most ruthless side, and I paid the price. Now, I'd rather keep clear of those paths and live with the certainty that some mysteries are meant to stay in the shadows, where maybe it's safer to leave them. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. Matthew Alexander Falder was born on 24th October 1988 and grew up in a well-off middle-class family in the quaint English town of Knutsford, Cheshire. He attended King's High School in the nearby town of Macclesfield, where he apparently excelled academically before being accepted to study seismic oceanography at Clare College, Cambridge. After completing his undergraduate degree, Matthew stayed in academia, earning both a master's and a PhD. Over the course of his lengthy studies, he went on to become a postdoctoral researcher and lecturer at the University of Birmingham. Everyone who knew him described Matthew as a popular, outgoing lad, well-liked by many, thanks to his great charm and wicked sense of humor. But what no one suspected was that Matthew harbored a dark, disturbing secret. During his first or second year at university, he shared a house with several other students. It was what the Americans call a mixed house, where students were trusted to choose their own flatmates regardless of gender. That's how Matthew ended up living with an anonymous young woman who later spoke out about his shocking and unsettling sense of humor. On one occasion, Matthew joked to the woman about secretly filming her while she used the shared bathroom. The suggestion was so wildly out of line that she just laughed it off as a bit of banter. But the truth was, he had actually been filming her while she showered in that communal bathroom. It wasn't just a joke, it was a thinly veiled confession. And the fact she didn't take it seriously only encouraged Matthew to keep up his predatory behavior. Over time, this man sank deeper and deeper into a web of digital depravity that would culminate in one of the most harrowing and disgraceful criminal cases in British history. Like many of his peers, Matthew spent countless hours working on a computer, writing research papers, and studying. But as a fully devoted researcher, he could be glued to the keyboard for up to 12 hours a day. While others might have found staring at a screen for that long rather dull, Matthew had no such problem. On the contrary, he found the vastness of the internet utterly fascinating, especially when he stumbled upon the deep web. Matthew started to get to grips with something called Tor, which is actually an acronym for the Onion Router. It's a free, open-source piece of software that enables anonymous browsing and communication online. Tor routes internet traffic through a global, volunteer-run network of over 7,000 relays. For those unfamiliar, Tor is essentially a router that protects a user's privacy by hiding their location and activity from anyone conducting network surveillance or traffic analysis. Like any tool, though, it can be used for good or ill. It all depends on the user. In Matthew's case, his intentions were nothing short of sinister. He began using his newfound anonymity to access websites filled with extremely violent child exploitation content, adopting disturbing usernames that matched his twisted behavior. 666 Devil and Evil Mind. But Matthew didn't just watch some of the most graphically horrifying and chilling videos on the dark web. Which is saying something. He also downloaded them and circulated them to other corners of the dark net. These videos didn't just depict abuse of children. They included torture and executions of adults, the elderly, and animals, found on sites with names like Wounded to the Core and Unlimited Fun. These were the places Matthew frequented as a twisted form of relaxation after a hard day's work at the university. However, this wasn't the only way he liked to have a bit of fun. He had other methods too. Sometime around 2009, Matthew began catfishing a number of unsuspecting internet users. At first, it was harmless amusement, messing about by contacting online sellers and haggling ridiculously low prices for their goods. But it quickly escalated to the point where he was luring naive young people out to remote locations for dates that never actually took place. Rather than getting bored of these antics, he kept pushing the boundaries, increasing the scale and reach of his schemes. And the more he did it, the darker it all became. It's believed that in the early 2010s, Matthew stumbled across an advert on the online marketplace Gumtree.com, posted by a 14-year-old girl looking for weekend babysitting jobs to earn a bit of pocket money. This is where his twisted mind set him on a path of no return, one marked by depravity and cruelty that would earn him a notoriously grim spot in his country's history. Posing as a similarly aged art student called Liz, Matthew got in touch with the anonymous girl, struck up a conversation, and slowly started earning her trust. As they chatted, Liz told the girl she was drawing or painting a series of still life images of human subjects, and bit by bit, Matthew methodically persuaded her to send compromising photos of herself, under the guise that his intentions were relatively innocent and artistic. What the young girl didn't realize was that she was about to step right into a vile trap. After securing the teenager's photos, Matthew finally revealed there was no Liz, and told his victim that if she didn't obey all his whims, he would leak the pictures online. He took his time deciding on his first demand, and when he eventually sent his email to the still shocked girl, she was absolutely horrified. Matthew ordered her to take a photo of herself licking the toilet seat at her secondary school. This task was not only utterly humiliating and unsanitary, but it also served as extra blackmail material, ensuring she wouldn't dare refuse any future demands. It cannot be disclosed for legal reasons due to her age at the time she was victimized, but she later gave an anonymous statement to the British media. "I was ashamed of those photos. They were awful, and I didn't want any of my friends to think I wanted to do that. But I also felt like no one would understand me or believe me because no one was there holding me down or putting a knife to my throat. No one was physically forcing me, even though that's how I felt every single day for months," the young girl said. In the weeks and months that followed, Matthew sent her text messages with demands that grew ever more twisted and dangerous. Every day, when I woke up, there'd be a message from him. He said there'd be another one waiting for me when I got home from school. Even when we weren't talking, I was anxious, spending the whole day just waiting for the next message to come through. On top of the stress from the horrific ordeal, it had a devastating impact on the girl's studies, her relationships, and her day-to-day life. She stopped talking to her family, stopped going out, and every waking moment was spent trying to appease Matthew's demands to prevent the photos from being leaked. Eventually, he reduced her to his slave. As the girl edged closer and closer to the brink of a complete breakdown, she begged Matthew to leave her alone. She'd done everything he asked, including sending more intimate photos of herself, doing utterly degrading things. The girl confessed she wanted to end her own life, which was hardly surprising for someone so young, enduring such prolonged and daily abuse. Meanwhile, Matthew posted this content on one of his favorite hardcore websites. There, he wrote extensively about the torment he inflicted on her and bragged about being the 14-year-old girl in a web of despair and humiliation, claiming that his intention was to break her mentally and that he didn't care if she lived or died. Other diary entries included a list titled 100 Things We Want to See at Least Once. Two of the items included were a girl being used as a slave and a video showing a child's bones being slowly and deliberately broken by an obviously sadistic person. When the girl brought up the subject of taking her own life, he actually encouraged her to do so, saying that he had already uploaded the pictures of her on various dark websites and that if she took her own life, those same images would find their way into the inboxes of her family, friends, and teachers. This man was a true sadist. He truly enjoyed inflicting pain and humiliation on his victims. He enjoyed their despair and watching her break down psychologically. It is unclear when or how the anonymous girl managed to evade Matthew, but we do know that in at least one case he made good on his threats and sent compromising photographs of the girl to her own parents. It is more than likely the same anonymous girl who gave an interview after her ordeal, as at one point she is quoted as saying, "I don't talk to my family anymore. I guess I felt they wouldn't understand. So when I finally told them what happened, they basically said it was my fault, and that's how the relationship broke down." Having completed the cycle of manipulation, blackmail, and abuse, Matthew simply moved on to find another victim. The contemporary internet proved to be a good choice for such a depraved predator, using a series of 70 different carefully crafted fake personalities. Matthew's blackmail operation continued for many years and with many random victims. The identities of most of these victims have changed and remain a jealously guarded secret. But using a breakdown of the charges brought against him, we can piece together a fairly detailed picture of what Matthew forced them to do. Some of these charges are simply too obscene even for a horror channel like this one, but the charges he was indicted on give us a look at how abhorrent his actions were. Some of the less obscene ones were, and I quote, compulsory forced labor. This meant that Matthew had blackmailed one of his victims into performing small tasks for him, essentially turning them into modern-day slaves. Matthew was also charged with 3 counts of participating in the activities of an organized crime group, meaning there's a good chance he shared evidence of his crimes with a large online network of predators. But it wasn't just indecent images that Matthew shared. The UK Crown Prosecution Service later charged the man with 2 counts of possession. It is believed that he simply downloaded one of the predator manuals, written by another source, while the second manual was almost certainly composed by Matthew himself and details exactly how he was able to blackmail so many different people from different walks of life at the same time. It is almost a given that this manual was found and downloaded by another British predator, a 36-year-old Norfolk man named David Wilson, who admitted to 96 offenses related to child exploitation in early 2021. It appears that the investigation into Matthew's online activities began sometime in 2013, and over the course of the next 4 years, Britain's National Crime Agency would be joined by none other than MI6, US Homeland Security, and Australian Federal Police. The scope and scale of Matthew's crimes were so horrific that even an unnamed Israeli intelligence agency became involved in the operation, naming him as one of the world's most prolific and dangerous cybercriminals. After his initial hearing on October 16, 2017, Matthew pleaded guilty to 137 separate crimes against 46 different victims. 4 months later, he was sentenced to 32 years in prison, plus an additional 6 years without parole. The judge in the case described Matthew as a thoroughly twisted and sadistic man with devious, persistently manipulative, and extremely cruel behavior, who clearly delighted in the pain and anguish he caused. Thank you for listening to our stories until the end. Now, if you haven't already, you can leave your like and subscribe. See you in the next episodes.